Energy Saving Trust. Today's webinar from the Energy Saving Trust is going to focus on making the most of solar energy in your home. So we'll be looking at different types of solar technology, how you can maximise solar power using energy storage systems, and the support and advice available to you. This webinar is part of a series we're delivering this year. The work is funded by the Scottish Government as part of their support for home renewables and energy efficiency, which is there to help lower Scottish householders' energy bills, meet climate change targets and build a lower carbon economy. Okay, so before we get started, just some general housekeeping points about the webinar in case you haven't attended one of these before. So you can hear us, but we can't hear you. This is perfectly normal for webinars, so don't be alarmed or worry about background noise. If you look to the right of your screen, you should be able to see a control panel. You can type any questions that you have for us in there. These won't be visible to other listeners, but we will be able to see them. We're recording this webinar and we'll send you a link to it afterwards so you can watch it again later if you want to. And the webinar today will last about 45 minutes. Okay, so this is the agenda we've got today. So first off, we're going to hear from an industry expert, Josh King, who's operations manager at AES Solar. Josh is going to give us an overview of the technologies available, what types of homes they're suitable for, and how to make the most of them once you've got them installed. Then my colleague Joanna Wilson will cover some of the advice and financial support schemes currently available to customers installing, or in some cases who have installed, a solar technology. Then to bring it into perspective, Nancy Jackson, a member of our Green Homes Network, is with us, and we're going to have a chat about her own experience of installing both solar PV and solar thermal systems in her home. The Green Homes Network is a Scotland-wide network of householders that have made improvements to their home and are happy to share their experiences with others. And finally, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to answer some of your questions. Great, so I am going to pass over to Josh for an overview of solar technologies.
Great, thanks very much, Tessa. So hi everybody, my name's Josh King. I've been invited here as the invited solar specialist from AES Solar to give you an introduction to solar in Scotland in general, the types of solar technologies that are available to you, whether they're right for you and how to get the most of them if you do choose to get them installed. So to give you a brief overview, I'm going to just talk a little bit about who AES Solar are, a little bit about solar in Scotland. We're going to introduce solar PV and solar thermal, which are the two main types of solar technologies available to homeowners. And then, as you can see, we're going to talk a little bit more about other types of technologies, ancillary technologies that can help you get the most out of your solar PV and solar thermal. So just to kick off, who are AES Solar? Why are we here and why are we talking to you about solar today? We've been around for 40 years next year. Originally started off as a manufacturer of solar thermal collectors, which is for solar water heating, one of the technologies we'll talk about today. As time went on and technologies have been introduced and improved, we now manufacture, design, install and maintain solar technologies. We offer consultations, whether that be to homeowners, businesses, or housing developers, for example, and this is free, no obligation advice. Anybody's free to get in touch with us for some impartial advice on solar. We cover all of Scotland and the north of England. We operate solar PV and solar thermal installations for a range of other suppliers and producers. So very often it's a case where some homeowners are installed by AES Solar and they aren't even aware of it at the time. We now specialise in all things solar, right from the small 1 or 2 panel systems on a caravan motorhome, right up to the the large hundreds of panels across a field. So I just want to start off by perhaps busting the Scottish solar myth. Something that we hear very often is that why would I want solar panels on my roof or on my ground because there's no sun in Scotland. So before we talk a little bit about how much sun is available, how much energy is available to us in Scotland, we need to get familiar with what our energy is, how we buy our energy, how we use our energy. So something we really need to be aware of moving forward, whether you're going for solar technology or not, is kilowatt hours. Now that's a unit of energy that you use. It it's what's in your electricity meters, it's how your electricity is priced. So if you look at your electricity bills, you'll often see 13, 14 pence per kilowatt hour. So this is a really important number. If you look at your gas bill, for example, you might see 4 or 5 pence a kilowatt hour. So these are the measurements we use to measure electricity and energy. Scotland uses about 142 billion of these every year. So as you can see from the slides, that's enough to travel around the world on a flight 23,000 times. It's also enough to turn the Falkirk wheel, for example, about 95 billion times. And something that might be more familiar to you, it's about 2 trillion cups of tea, or 2 million billion cups of tea. So that's probably where most of our energy in Scotland is going. Now, just to give you an idea of the solar potential in Scotland, the sun can deliver this much energy, enough energy for that million billion cups of tea in just 1.4 square kilometres in Edinburgh. Now, regardless of where you are in Scotland, as you can see in the slides as well, that is 1.6 kilometres squared in John O'Groats. So anywhere in Scotland, the solar potential is there. Now, just to give you an idea of the size and scale of the space we need to get all of our energy for solar, there's a little 1.6 kilometres squared in John O'Groats there for you. Now, obviously, it isn't as straightforward as that. That would be if we were capturing all of the solar coming into this area. We do have to be aware that there are different technologies with different efficiencies, and we'll go into that in a little more detail just now. So here are the two main technologies. There's solar water heating. Now, the panels look very similar, but if you look at the top picture there, the solar water heating is on your right-hand side, just on the main roof of the house. Now, that provides hot water for baths, showers, your washing, dishes, etc. Now, you can use the same solar water heating panels to provide a contribution to your space heating, to your radiators, but of course, you know, your require for heating your house is usually when the sun isn't shining, so more so in the winter and more so in the evening. So solar water heating is mostly for heating your hot water, which you will be using throughout the year. Typically, it's about 2 to 4 panels for a household. So you can see in both pictures there, the top picture on the right-hand side, you have 2 solar thermal panels. In the bottom picture, they're slightly more hidden. So right in the middle, that looks like 2 Velux windows. That's your integrated solar thermal panels there. A system will cost typically between £3,000 to £5,000. Now that depends on how many panels you're going to need, so how much water you use, and whether you need, you know, a new hot water cylinder, something like this. And we're going to come on to that in more detail. Solar PV. Now, these are the ones that are usually on the tip of people's tongues, and what you see on most rooftops these days, they provide electricity. So that electricity can be used by any appliance in your house. It's going to generate electricity. You have the option to use it as and when you need it. Any excess that's generated is going to go back to the grid, and we'll look at that in a little more detail as well. Typically, you'll see 12 to 16 panels. So in that bottom picture, you can actually see there are 16 panels, and I think there could be 14 panels in the top picture, and that costs roughly between £4,000 and £8,000. Now, I'm not going to go too much into details of the funding available or the paybacks, but perhaps Joe is going to talk a little bit more about funding from the EST later on. So let's start off with solar PV. How does it work? Now, on the right-hand side, you can see the solar PV panels that will usually go on your roof. They will travel through those cables down to an inverter. Now, what that inverter is going to do is that's going to take the electricity for your house, the electricity from the panels, and make sure it's at the right voltage and the right frequency for all the appliances in your house. And as you can see on that picture, that electricity is going to travel down through a generation meter, which you're going to use to work out how many kilowatt hours, how many units of energy you've produced. That's going to go into your distribution board, which is your main fuse board in your house, and from there, all of your appliances can be using any of that electricity that's generated. Of course, you can see your electricity meter right back out to the grid. That's where any extra energy is going to go. Now, a typical 4 kilowatt system, which is that kind of 16, 14 panel system that you'll see on people's homes, will produce about 3,500 units of energy every year. To give you an idea of what that means, the average Scottish household will use about 4,100 units every year. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you're wiping out 75% of your energy bill straight away, because the sun's power is intermittent. That means it's going to You're going to get more generation during the day and less in the night. You're going to get more in the summer. You're going to get less in the winter. So we typically say a household might use anywhere between 30 and 70% of what they generate from their solar. Now, 30% is at the lower end of the scale where you're not really changing your behaviour much. It's quite a passive system. 70% is maybe if you're really keeping an eye on your solar, you're making effort to utilise it best. So anywhere between there, and we'll hopefully talk to you about how to get the most out of it. Now, is solar PV right for you? Well, start off by thinking about some of the questions we've listed here. Do I own the property? Now, if it's your property, then clearly you have the freedom to install solar panels. You don't have to worry too much about planning if you're going on your rooftop, because most solar PV systems are classed as permitted development. You don't have to ask for any special applications. If you don't own your home, that isn't a problem. So if you're a private tenant, for example, it's a conversation you can have with your landlord. If you share a block of flats, that's a conversation that can be had with your tenants, with the other tenants. And any type of social housing, there's still the opportunity to speak to the social landlord there as well. Making sure you have enough roof space or ground space, for example. So you can install on the roof, but you can also install it in a garden. Now, you don't have to go for this kind of magic 14 to 16 panel system. That's typically where people aim to get, given that it can generate quite a lot of energy, quite similar to the amount of energy you're going to use every year. But you're still able to go for a 2-panel, 3-panel system. You might just not get the same economies of scale, albeit you might use more of the energy generated. It's important to think about what direction your roof space is facing. So on that top picture here, you can see that kind of yellow curve. Now that's quite high generation. You can see in the middle of the day is what that's describing, where that peak is. Now a south facing system is going to produce much more energy in the middle of the day. And so across the course of the year, the south facing system is going to produce a lot more energy overall. However, if you look at that kind of lower, darker curve, that's having the same size solar PV system but split over your east and your west systems. So you can see that you might generate a little less over the course of the day, but you're going to get more in the evenings and more in the mornings, which can be quite helpful. Shading, you've got to be aware that there could be a lot of trees in your garden or other people's neighbouring properties that are going to shade your household. You can see a bit of shading on the picture below. Now, that's not going to be prohibitory. You can still install if you're going to have partial shading throughout the day. However, it is important that your installer or whoever is recommending solar to you makes you aware of this and makes you aware of how that's going to affect your generation. Get an idea of your bills, how much you're using in units of energy or how much you're paying, and that's really going to help somebody, a salesperson or an installer, estimate how much you're going to be able to use, and also be aware of what energy is being used throughout the day. So if you get installed, how are you going to get the most of it? Well, if we look at this top picture here on the right hand side, you can see the green curve is how much energy is being produced. The blue underneath that is how much of that energy you're using yourself. And you can see in the top picture, that's quite a large chunk of energy. And the yellow blotch at the end, that's how much you're actually buying in, because you've stopped generating solar there in the evening and you've started buying power in. Now, if you look at the bottom graph, it's very similar, except you can see this person's behavior is different. So they're using much less energy during the day, which is why the blue curve is much lower. They're using much more energy in the evening, which is where the yellow curve is much higher. Now, that's obviously going to reduce the amount of savings you're able to make. So you've really got to be aware that the more energy you can use through the day, the more you can maximise your savings. So as we can see on the slides here, a typical system can pay back 8 to 12 years. There is feed-in tariff available until March next year, and that can be working out about £125 a year. It's worth taking advantage of. Again, maximising the savings is key. So how do we do that? You've got to monitor both what you're using and what you're generating. You've got to kind of get an idea of those graphs on the right-hand side, get an idea of that in your head. And how can you use more during the day? Well, there are certain heavy appliances which are much more convenient to use during the day. So if you think about your washing machine, that can be quite a high energy user. Ironing, showers, if anybody in the household is able to take their showers and baths during the day, they're going to make savings there. Something I didn't realise until I was interested in solar PV systems is what a delayed start option on my washing machine was ever for. Now, clearly, what you can do there is you can delay your washing machine to start in the middle of the day, and the likelihood is you're washing your clothes for free. Slow cookers are another great application if you've got solar PV. Rather than coming home in the evening, using a few kilowatt hours that you're buying from the grid, stick your slow cooker on before you go to work, and you're going to basically be cooking that meal for free over the course of the day. Staggering high energy appliances. So all that means is rather than wake up in the morning, turn on your shower, turn on your kettle and start frying your eggs all at the same time, that's going to mean even if you're producing solar energy, you're using way more than you're producing. So if you're able to kind of stagger those, do those things one at a time, stick the kettle on and then get in the shower. It sounds very simple, but it can save you a lot of money over the long run. So solar thermal is the other technology. How does that work? Well, as I said, it's mostly for heating your hot water. So you've got very similar looking solar panel on your roof or a solar collector. That's going to absorb heat from the sun. Now it does absorb all the sun's light energy and turn it into heat. So although you might not think it's a very hot day, if you think about when you get into a car with very dark seats on a sunny day and it's very hot, if you've not left the windows open, well, that car is not designed to capture heat and it's still capturing all of that heat by accident. So if you think about a solar collector which is designed to capture that sunlight, it really is an efficient way of capturing energy for your home. So heat is moved from those panels through pipes into your hot water tank. The hot water gets into the tank. You can use it for all your taps, showers, baths, everything like this. And of course, because it's not sunny throughout the year, and you're going to be needing water in the evening, solar thermal usually isn't a technology that you use on its own. It's usually complementary, so it works well with other heating systems. For example, a boiler, a heat pump, electric heating, something like this as a backup. Is it right for me? So ask yourself very similar questions to solar PV. Is it my house? Have I got a south facing, east or west facing array? I don't need as much space, obviously. Is it going to be shaded? But there are some extra considerations to take into account, such as how much hot water am I going to actually use? That helps you size the system. How much of my bills are actually hot water? So be very wary of somebody who tells you that, just because you've got a really high gas bill, that you should be getting a very large solar PV or solar thermal system, because across Scotland, I think about 10% of your gas bill is actually for your domestic hot water, rather than, and the rest is more likely for your space heating. Now, that's off the top of my head. It could be somewhere between 10 and 20%. So that's something to be aware of when you're looking at this type of technology. What type of heating do I have now? So the paybacks, the financial savings you're going to make is quite highly dependent on what your current fuel source is. So whether it's a boiler, heat pump, biomass, be aware of that. Are you going to need a new hot water tank? So some types of hot water cylinder are suitable for solar just to be added in straight away. Some are not, and that's something you'd have to discuss with a consultant, with the Energy Savings Trust, with somebody like ourselves, an installer. Getting the most out of your system. So simple tips if you do have solar thermal is time your boiler to come on at the end of the day. Whatever type of other heat source that may be, it might not be a boiler, give your solar thermal the time to add the heat. So think the solar thermal is going to be adding heat in the morning, in the afternoon, leading up to the evening. If you're not going to be in during that day, or if you're not going to have a high water demand, don't set that boiler to go on too long. There's nowhere for the solar heat to go if you've already heated that cylinder. Switch off the boiler early at night. So the idea here is once you've got the hot water you need in the evening, take your baths, take your showers, but switch the boiler off before that so it's not trying to replenish any of that lost heat. What you're trying to do is you're trying to empty that hot water, get all the hot water out of that cylinder in the evenings, so that when it comes to the mornings, you're able to refill that water cylinder with solar energy again. Now, if you want a little bit of hot water for the mornings, for your baths or showers in the mornings, then that's something that you just you get used of your own usage patterns, and you get used of, okay, how much do I need to stick my boiler on in the morning to get just enough for me to have those baths and showers, and then have plenty of space left for solar thermal to add something in. Using seasonal control, so be aware that your you can set your boiler to have different behaviours in the winter than in the summer. Obviously in the winter you're going to want to use your boiler a bit more. In the summer we aim to size a solar thermal system so that you don't have to use your backup heater at all in the summer. That's the way it's designed. So how are we going to make the most of these solar technologies overall? That's kind of the basics of solar PV and solar thermal. The next thing that some people might want to consider is energy storage. Now that's particularly for the PV side. So if you see this graph on the right hand side, the blue and green is all your solar energy generation throughout the course of an average day. The blue is how much of that you're able to use. You can see in this case it's not a great deal because you're not using as many appliances. The red is where you're buying from the grid. Now what we want to do is we want to be able to store some of that green stuff there that's extra generation going back to the grid, and we want to use it in some of those red areas where we're buying from the grid. So as you can see here, here's a homeowner with probably the exact same system, but this time they've got battery storage. And as you can see, those red curves from the previous graphs are now turned into blue curves, which means that is solar energy you're using. It's been stored up for use in the evening and in the earlier morning. Now, there are wider benefits to energy storage. You obviously got independence from the grid. You're storing up your solar energy. You can also have battery storage systems that can support you in times of a power cut. You can also offer support to the grid. So when there's too much renewables on the grid, you could be getting paid to be taking in some of that extra energy and using it later on. Again, this is I'm probably running on time here, and it's quite a short presentation, so please do come and speak to us for more advice. There is much more you can do with your battery storage system. We're able to offer impartial advice on that. Now, other ways you can make the most of it, you don't have to invest into battery storage right away. Simple things like just keeping an eye on your generation meter. Look at that top picture there. That's what most people are likely going to have in their household soon. That's a smart meter. Keeping an eye on your smart meter, looking at when you're using your gas, when you're using your electricity is the best way to kind of change your behaviours, get the most out of your solar PV. Now that can, from just monitoring your generation meter, you can look at simple handheld devices which you can buy for, £100, £200, and they might give you a nice little dashboard to sit in your kitchen and see whenever there's excess solar energy, you can start switching more appliances on. It can be that straightforward, but it can save you a lot of money in the long run. There are more in-depth online monitoring packages you can look at, and if you look at that bottom picture there, I'm not going to mention too many brands, but here is a kind of whole solar PV inverter and monitoring package which will allow you to see how every individual panel is performing, how much you've used or each day, month, year, how much you've sent back to the grid each day, month, year, finding out whether battery storage is right for you. There are all these different levels of monitoring, and it's each to their own taste, really. And eventually, moving forward, home energy management systems and kind of integrated systems where you've got smart devices, washing machines, everything, to the control of an app. That's where things are eventually going in the long term. Which leads us on to smart devices. So other ways you can really get the most out of your solar. First on the list there, we've got solar immersion diverters. Now what these are pretty impressive pieces of kit which can take any excess electricity that you're generating, monitor what you're sending back to the grid, and if you're sending anything back to the grid, that can be diverted into your hot water tank, and that can really increase the savings that you're able to make. Smart plugs and sockets are readily available. They're getting cheaper and cheaper these days as well. Smart plugs look just like that top picture there, that look a bit like 3 or 4 unhappy faces. It's actually smart plugs going into your sockets, and what they can do is they can be controlled by an app, they can be controlled by time. You can set them to only charge your laptops, your mobile phones, switch certain things on, your slow cooker again, things that can be switched on during the day or only when you've got excess PV. That middle picture there, that's an example of a smart thermostat. So getting the most out of your solar thermal system there, what you can do is you can get smart thermostats that decide when to turn your boiler or your heat sources on. They can start to learn your behaviour patterns. Now, although that sounds a bit scary, that's as simple as working out how much hot water you're using roughly each day, working out if it might go up at the weekend, down at the weekend. So you're not heating a whole hot water tank every day, just an off chance you might need it. And that allows you to save a fortune. what these smart thermostats are able to do these days is they're also able to work out how much extra solar PV electricity you might have and whether we should divert some of that into your tank rather than turn on your boiler. They can also use a bit of weather forecasting and say how much solar thermal are we going to get today, how much of that solar water heating energy, and make sure we don't switch on your boiler if there's some daylight to come at 12 noon and you're going to be able to fill your hot water tank. So these things, small investments you can make to really save yourself a fortune. Now that bottom picture there is an example of a smart electric vehicle charger. Now again, I'm probably already way over time, so I'm not going to go too much into detail, but there are devices that can use your excess PV to charge your car. And again, home energy management systems are the full package is where we're going. So what is a home energy management system? So just like this picture shows you here, it's kind of a whole integrated system from for your home. So you've got your energy generation on your roof here, for example, your inverter, your smart devices on the right hand side. I've got all your sockets, your immersion diverters, your storage, and even your EV chargers. And these things all communicate, they all learn your behavior, and are able to save you a lot of money in the long run. So thanks very much for bearing with me, and if you're looking for any more free, no obligation advice, feel free to contact us. Thanks again, and I'll hand you over to Joe.
Hi there, thanks very much for that, Josh. Obviously, loads to think about if you're thinking about installing a solar technology. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll take a look at them. So in terms of what support we can provide, if you're thinking about solar technologies, we can do that in a number of ways. We can do it through advice, and there are also financial support schemes available. For advice, we obviously have lots of information on our webpage, but we also have more tailored support available through Home Energy Scotland. And that's a network of advice centres, and these are funded by the Scottish Government and managed by Energy Saving Trust. We've got 5 advice centres across Scotland, and what's really important about them is that they can give free, independent and impartial advice. It's also localised to your area. It's really important that it's impartial, because that way no one's trying to sell you anything here. We're not trying to promote a financial scheme above another financial support scheme. So it's just very much tailored towards you and your home. And they can give advice not only on renewable technologies, but also on energy efficiency, transport, water, resources and waste as well. So it's quite a holistic approach. You can look at a sort of wide range of areas, which ties in with what Josh was talking about installing a solar technology, but also maximising your use of it and changing your behaviour. Each of our advice centres also has specialist advisors, and if you had were a real interest in installing renewable technology like solar PV or thermal, you might be suitable for an in-home visit. This is quite a tailored support, obviously. It's aimed at owner occupiers and private sector landlords, and it's available for properties in Scotland. And what they would do as part of their visit is it's a free visit, and they would assess your property and produce a report for that. And that report would look at your suitability for not just for renewable technologies, but potentially also solid wall insulation, if that was an appropriate measure, and also other energy efficiency measures. And it's quite important that they look not just at renewables alone, but also energy efficiency, because obviously any renewable technology is going to work much better if it's in a property that's already energy efficient, and make sure that you're sort of warm and comfortable throughout the year. The report can also look at your fuel bill and carbon savings that you might see if you install the renewable technology, and it'll also explain a bit about the financial support that's out there that you might want to make use of. Like I said before, there's quite a lot to think about if you're thinking about installing a renewable technology, so they can help to sort of tie the different support schemes available together. And that brings us on to financial support available. It's probably quite a big thing to think about if you're thinking about solar PV or solar thermal. just going to look briefly at 3 schemes that are available just now: the Home Energy Scotland loan, the Domestic Renewable Heat Incentive, and the feed-in tariff schemes. But I would say that it is really important to note that financial schemes do change throughout the year. They can also be other government schemes. This isn't an exhaustive list. So there might be schemes available to you based on your location or your personal circumstances. So the best first port of call, I think, is to phone Home Energy Scotland on the 0808 number at the bottom of the screen here. They can talk you through what might be available to you, the different rules and eligibility, and how you might be able to combine support as well. And that number is free from landlines and from most mobiles too. So the Home Energy Scotland loan, that's an interest-free loan funded by the Scottish Government, and it supports sort of wide range of measures here. So if you were thinking about installing solar PV, you could apply for that under this loan. As under a renewable technology, you could also apply for an energy storage system and energy efficiency improvements. So it's quite a sort of well-rounded loan. You can make quite a few improvements at the same time. It's available to owner-occupiers and eligible private sector landlords, and you can find out a bit more about that at the link below. So there's up to 17.5 grand available for renewable systems and 6 grand for an energy storage system if you wanted to do that alongside. So there's not time to go through all of the eligibility criteria for the loan because there are lots of conditions you need to think about. But the first thing to know is that you will need a Home Energy Scotland referral for this, and that's important to make sure that you get advice on the loan and also to check that there's no other support that you're also eligible for. You'll also need to use a product and installer that's certified under the microgeneration certification scheme. And we also need to know that the measures that you want to install are recommended in a qualifying energy report. That's to make sure that if you want solar PV or solar thermal, it is actually something that's suitable for your property and that can be expected to work. Home Energy Scotland can advise on these reports and what reports you can use. In some cases they can provide them. It's also not linked to other schemes, the loan, but you can combine it with other schemes. And also you will need to have a loan offer before you start work to make sure that your funding is allocated to you. This is because partly because funding is subject to availability. And the loan is interest free, so you won't have any interest on your repayments, but there is a small administrative fee, which is a maximum of £150. So, and if you ever have a look at our loans page on our website, you'll see this table. Lets you know the maximum loan value per system. You can see for PV and solar thermal, you can get up to £5,000, up to 100% of the cost of the measure. And it's now possible also to get a heat or electric battery for the value of up to £6,000. So if you did want to install solar PV, you might want to think also about a battery at the same time. You could do that in the same loan application, or if you already have PV, you could just apply for an electric battery on its own. So if you do install a renewable heating system like solar thermal, you're probably going to be interested in the Domestic Renewable Heat Incentive, and this is a UK government scheme administered by Ofgem. So Home Energy Scotland specialists can advise on the rules for this scheme, but it would be Ofgem that need to confirm eligibility, and that would give you quarterly payments over 7 years. Again, you need to have MCS product and installer, and it also needs to be, your product needs to be listed as eligible on the RHI product eligibility list. If you have a look at our webpage for the RHI, the links at the bottom of the screen here, there's links to the product eligibility list and also the domestic RHI calculator. That's quite a useful tool. It sits on the UK government website and that can estimate your potential payments. So that's renewable heat support. For electricity generating systems like PV, you might want to look at the feed-in tariff scheme. That's also funded by the UK government, sorry. It's overseen by Ofgem, but in this case it would be energy suppliers known as FITS licensees that would deal with applications and with payments. Home Energy Scotland can again advise on the rules here. It's not just solar PV it's for, you can also apply for wind or hydro turbines, etc. And this would make payments over 20 years for both electricity generated and exported. One really important point for the feed-in tariff scheme is that there's currently a consultation out just now which proposes to close the scheme to new applicants after the 31st of March 2019. That consultation is still open. So if you have a look at our feed-in tariffs page, you can find links to that that consultation to find out more. You can also make a response up to the 13th of September. And there's also links to our solar energy calculator and our cashback calculators too. So that's financial support available. There's also some online resources you might want to use at any point in your journey, to be honest. We've got quite a lot of information on our website. We've got renewables pages, we've got tools, and we've also got information, well, more information about any sort of financial support schemes available. Some of the ones you might find most useful if you're thinking about solar technologies are our solar energy calculator, which can estimate the payments you might receive for a solar PV system. You just need to put in some information. Josh was talking earlier about, things to think about, like the direction your property faces and shading and things like that, and this tool sort of brings that together. You can tailor that to your location just by putting in your postcode. The photo given here is actually the roof of a bus, but you can use it to pinpoint your property. And our renewable selector tool also looks at suitability of potential renewable technologies for your property. So not just PV and solar thermal, but also wind turbines, heat pumps. And if you did get to the point where you're looking at installing, you'll need to find an installer. RHI, FITS and the loan all need an MCS installer to do the work, and you can find details of all MCS installers and products on the MCS webpage. We also have the Renewables Installer Finder tool, and that's a database that MCS installers that operate in Scotland can voluntarily sign up to, and they can leave a bit more information. They can put offers available to customers, and it's all kept in one place. And what's also really important is that customers can leave reviews of their work as well. So it covers every Scottish local authority, and it's not a database of endorsed or recommended installers, but MCS installers that have voluntarily signed up to be on the tool. And you can search by distance from your postcode, by technology. You can look at the ratings and any offers that they've got available. But one last tool that I'll just look at quickly is the Green Homes Network, and that's probably one of our more unique and supportive tools. Green Homes Network is a network of households across Scotland that have made improvements to the property, either energy efficiency or renewable technologies, and it's built around case studies. So you can search the tool and then read a case study with more detailed information about the property and the work that they've done. So you can search it by area, property type, improvement measure and technology. So you can look for particularly solar PV in your area or solar thermal in an area you're thinking of moving to. And basically, once you've done a search, it'll generate a list or a map of potential homes in that area, and it allows homeowners to share their knowledge and experience, either through reading their case study, or in some cases we might even be able to arrange a visit or a phone call just for you to find out more. There's more than 1,000 homes on the network, and this is just homes of every type of description. So it's not just homes that have been built with the purpose of being energy efficient and having renewable technologies, but also, old hard to treat properties that have retrospectively put in solar PV system or solar thermal, for example. And you can see a couple of examples here that, here's on the left-hand side, you've got solar PV installed onto a flat roof, and on the right-hand side, a much newer property with solar PV and solar thermal. It's a sort of example of things that you can find here. So I'm just going to finish that by passing back over to Tessa, and who's going to speak to a Green Home Network member.
Okay, thanks very much, Jo. Thanks very much for interesting presentations from Josh and Jo. For the final bit of the webinar, we are going to speak to Green Home Network member Nancy Jackson, who's very kindly joined us today. So Nancy has installed solar PV, solar thermal and a ground source heat pump in her home. She received a home visit from Home Energy Scotland and also took out a loan through us, which Jo's just been talking about. So Nancy, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, great. Okay, so how long ago was it that you installed your solar PV and your solar thermal systems?
4 years ago.
4 years ago, okay. And what was it that sort of made you first interested in installing solar panels?
Obviously, we were going to build a new house, and we were keen to look at green energy and to look towards our future power usage, because we're now retired and we're in our house for the full day, really.
Okay, so you wanted something that you were going to be able to make the most of once you got it installed. Okay, so obviously it was a new house, so you put the solar PV and the solar thermal on. Josh was talking before about how you could make the most of solar panels by adapting how you use electricity. Did you make any changes to how you're using electricity in your home to try and make the most of the solar PV panels?
Yes, previously we always did put our dishwasher on, for example, in the evening after a evening meal, but we don't do that now. We put it on in the morning, usually after breakfast time, and the same with our washing machine. You know, always wait for a sunny day or look at the forecast to find out what's the best day for doing the washing in general terms. Okay,
that sounds good. And so those are quite easy changes for you to make?
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's good. And I suppose it's hard for you to be able to say what sort of savings you got from the panels because it was a new house that you built.
Sorry, I would just add that when I checked my meter after using my washing machine, it had hardly moved. You know, that was the only way that I felt that I could actually check that I was actually making the saving.
You were making that saving there. Okay, so the dishwasher and the washing machine. Okay, and you've also got a ground source heat pump installed. Did you find that worked well together with the solar panels?
Yes, the fuel system works very well together. It's very well linked, and I think they each complement each other. I think.
Yeah. You're a very green home altogether with all of those technologies.
Yes, we are. Yes, we've got a lot of insulation as well, and I think all those things together work very well.
Brilliant. Okay, so since you've had them installed, have you had any problems with the solar panels? Have you had to have any sort of repairs done?
None at all.
No. Oh, that's brilliant. Touch wood at the moment. And would you recommend the solar panels, either the PV or the thermal? Would you recommend that to other people?
I would recommend both. I think because I think from my own point of view, it's for the future. It's for it's for us all to be able to use this energy that is free from the sky.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Good.
Yes.
And did you, because I believe you had a home visit from one of the Home Energy Scotland advisors who could sort of tell you about which technologies. Were you sort of surprised when they told you how much you'd be able to save by having solar panels installed, or were you quite keen from the beginning?
We were quite keen at the beginning, but the more information that we received, we became even, well, it made us decide to go for the full energy efficient property that we have.
Brilliant. That's good. It sounds like you're very happy with all of those systems that you've got installed now.
We're extremely happy, yes.
Good, I'm glad. And do you mind, do you get the feed-in tariff and the renewable heat incentive for your
Yes, we get
technologies?
Got renewable heat incentive for our ground source heat pump and our solar thermal, and we have the fit tariffs for obviously our energy generated. And we also have a £10,000 loan.
Okay, you got the loan for the was that for the ground source heat pump?
Yes, I think so. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So it was a wee while ago now, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
No, well, that's brilliant because that's a sort of shows a real life example of all the schemes that Joe was just explaining there. Thank you, Nancy. That was really helpful. I don't know if you had anything else to add.
No, I think for most people looking into it, I found it quite complex to begin with.
Yeah.
Until I recognised what each thing actually meant. But once you actually understand that, it's certainly, it works very well for us, and we're extremely happy with our systems.
Brilliant. Okay, well that's really encouraging to hear. Thank you, Nancy. I think you're right that when people first start looking into renewable technologies, it can be a bit overwhelming, all of this information. But
Yes.
as Joe helpfully explained, there's lots of support out there to help you navigate all that. So yeah, I'm really pleased it's worked out for you, Nancy. Thank you very much. What we're going to move on to now is just a few question and answers that we've had from some of the webinar attendees. We'll just take a couple of minutes to do that. So I've got a couple I'm just going to answer myself, and then I will pass over to Josh. So we've had a couple of people asking about the feed-in tariff scheme closing in March 2019 and what's going to happen after that. So yeah, basically the UK government has proposed that they will be closing the scheme to new applicants after March 2019. Excuse me. That's the only information that we have. We don't know what will assuming that goes ahead, excuse me, we don't know what will happen after that. So I guess our advice would be if you want to receive the feed-in tariff, to look into solar PV now and install before the end of March 2019, because we don't know what will happen after that date. Somebody also asked a question about the FIT scheme for existing participants. If you already signed up the feed-in tariff scheme, you will receive that tariff for 20 years, or it used to be 25 years, but 20 years. So you've already got that agreement. So the closing of the FIT scheme only affects new applicants. It doesn't affect anybody who's already signed up to it. Okay, I'm going to ask Josh a couple of questions that we got through. So the first one, somebody's asked, they would like some more information on how to store excess power from the grid to their battery. And they've said, do they need to have an arrangement such as Economy 7?
Yeah, so there are, I'm not going to go too much into details of particular brands, but there are many different types of battery storage systems that we can take advantage of at the moment, and many of these battery systems do offer charging from the grid. Now, what that means is not just taking advantage of storing up your excess solar and using it later on, but actually in the evenings when the electricity is off peak, for example, storing up, buying some of that electricity cheap from the grid and using it later on in the day when the electricity is more expensive. Now, Economy 7 is a type of tariff that can take advantage of if you've got a lot of electric heating storage heaters, for example. You use a cheaper tariff in the evening and a more expensive tariff in the day. Now, that's getting slightly outdated. It's being replaced with more modern tariffs. So they have Economy 2000, which is similar, and there are more tariffs coming out which are going to be more than a day rate and a night rate. They'll actually be, different types of peak and off-peak times and different rates. You do have to check with your energy provider. You may need to change your current energy tariff, but it's a conversation you can have with ourselves or with your energy provider in the first instance. But basically, yes, there are battery storage systems that do allow you to charge off-peak times. Some of the battery systems available already partner with some of the big energy providers to offer you that complete package from the time that you purchase, with a switch over to a new tariff that allows you to buy cheap in the evenings or off peak and use during peak times.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Another question for you, Josh. Can you use a power diverter with energy storage?
So again, the power diverter is the device we spoke about, which can take any of your excess PV energy and put it into your hot water tank. And the question is basically asking, can you use that along with energy storage? Something to be aware of is that your hot water tank itself could be described as energy storage, could be described as a battery for heat. So the question is, if you've got your hot water tank and that's taking excess electricity, can you also put excess electricity into your battery? And the answer is absolutely yes. Something you've got to be aware of is if you have a PV system with a power diverter and you're going to add a battery to it, or if you've got a PV system and you're going to add a battery and a power diverter, for example, you must make sure that these devices are compatible. So one sure way to do that is to get them from the exact same supplier. So some manufacturers make both batteries and power diverters. But a reputable installer should be able to advise you on compatible. The next thing to check is which order those things are going to come into play. And what I mean by that is as soon as there's electricity being generated from your PV system, you're not using it all in your house and it's going to go back to the grid. You need to know.
Sorry, we're just having a little problem with the volume. Apologies to everybody. I am just going to swap microphones with Josh so you can hear his answer fully. Sorry about that, everybody.
Just answer that last question. Okay. Hi there, so I'm not sure how well you heard me. Hopefully you can hear me fine now. Yep, so I'm just going to recap the last question from Tessa, which was, can you use a PV diverter and a battery system at the same time? The answer in short is yes, you absolutely can. Just to recap for anybody who missed it, the power diverter is something that takes your excess PV energy and puts it into your hot water tank. So can you use that along with your battery? Yes, you can. The first thing to be aware of though is that if you have something that's going to take your excess PV energy and put in your hot water tank, and you're also going to have a battery which is designed to take your excess PV energy and store it up for later, you've got to make sure those two things are compatible. You've got to make sure they don't try and work at the same time or they don't try and steal energy off one another. So the best way to do that is just speak to your installer and make sure you're getting two products which are compatible with one another. The next thing to check with your installer or to check for yourself is which order these things are going to act. So if it's probably going to be more economically viable depending on the setup of your house, it's likely the case where you're going to want to store any extra energy in the battery. However, if your battery is fully charged and then you're still going to export, then you want to divert into your hot water tank. So yeah, the short answer is they both work together, but you really want to make sure they're compatible with one another and they're going to work in the order you'd like them to work in.
Thank you very much, Josh. Apologies again there for the volume problems we're having. I've got a couple of questions here around the Home Energy Scotland loan, which I'm going to answer. So somebody's asked what are the repayment terms for the interest-free loans. So you can find these on the Energy Saving Trust website. It is 5 to 12 years, depending on the value of your loan. So if you look at the website, you can see what would be applicable there. And also just to mention that you can repay the loan early if you wanted to. Another question, what proportion of the Home Energy Scotland loan can be drawn down as a deposit? That's up to 60% of the loan, but that would be assessed on a case-by-case basis. And finally, somebody asked if we provide a list of recommended installers. As the Energy Saving Trust, we're impartial, so we don't provide a list of recommended installers, but in Joe's presentation, there was the Renewable Installer Finder tool, which is a list of MCS members who've decided to sign up to the tool, and that has customer reviews, so you can go on and find installers in your area. Apologies if we haven't got around to your questions. I've never seen quite so many questions on a webinar, so it's obviously an interesting topic for people. Thank you very much for joining us today, and huge thanks to Josh and Nancy for joining us. Your input was very helpful. We've put a link at the end of the webinar with some, hopefully we have, some link to further information, and we'll also send this webinar link out to you so you can watch again, and you can get all the web links if you want to find out more information. There we are, there's the website. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you found that helpful. Okay, thank you, bye.